So I've been training in martial arts with my daughter since she was about 6 years old, and we just both earned our provisional black belts in Okinawan karate just a few weeks ago, after years and years of training our way up through the colored belt ranks from white to orange to blue to green to brown, and now, if you see it on us, black with a big red stripe. Now that red doesn't mean that we're not actual black belts. We are. But what it does mean is that our karate school is giving us a year to complete our training with the understanding that this level is not where the learning stops. It's just the point where we've mastered the basics enough that the real learning can begin. And one of the first lessons you learn when you start reaching the higher ranks of a martial art is how important the fundamentals are. Punches, blocks, basic kicks, stances. Those are the skills you practice at any level, no matter what belt level you are. And you know why? It's because even when you're fighting a very skilled opponent, it's not the fancy moves that tend to score points or win fights. It's the basics. And so, when we talk about marketing, it's important that we constantly review and go over those basics, because my experience has been that marketers really love to talk about the sexy, sophisticated stuff that sounds cutting edge and impressive, but they tend to ignore the fundamentals. That might be one of the reasons why so many new businesses and products fail within just a few years. And it might also be one of the reasons why organizations that are really good at marketing stick around for decades and decades. So today, we're going to review one of the most fundamental tools in marketing management strategy, the Ansoff Matrix. And if for some reason you're not familiar with this tried and true tool, you're in luck. Because what's old is new again, and this tool should definitely be in your marketing toolbox. I'm Sean in St. Louis, and this is the Marketing Gateway. So the Ansoff Matrix was created in 1957 by a mathematician and business specialist named H. Igor Ansoff. If you couldn't tell from the name, he was born in Russia and grew up there during the first years of the communist government under Lenin, but his parents were actually capitalists. And so Igor Ansoff spent his formative years learning how the systems around him worked, and that also drove him to look for ways to press his advantages through innovative ideas. He eventually immigrated to New York and got an engineering degree and then a master's in modern physics, and finally, after a stint in the Navy during World War II, a doctorate in applied mathematics through Brown University. He wound up working for defense contractors, including the Rand Corporation and Lockheed, but it was around the time he left Rand that he published a paper called Strategies for Diversification in 1957, where he articulated the 4 strategies that would become the Ansoff Matrix: market penetration, market development, product development, and diversification. These are helpful strategies to outline, but here's what's really cool about this framework. They fit neatly into a matrix that helps you to know which one to select. All you have to do is determine if you're dealing with a new or existing market, and then with a new or existing product. And there it is, the Ansoff Matrix. So let's break these down one by one. If we've got an existing market and an existing product, we don't have to think too hard about strategy because our goal is to increase market penetration. We can use some tactics like advertising, improving quality, lowering the price, finding new customers within our market, or maybe even weakening our competitors or even acquiring them. And you see marketers do things like this all the time. They might reformulate a product to make it more appealing, or they might change the packaging to make it more eye-catching, or they might streamline the design to make it cheaper, or they might collaborate with another brand to try to expand their customer base. Often, marketers work on developing the brand itself so that the products under it will seem more attractive by association. And they'll also try to find ways to keep the brand current and relevant through a promotional strategy. With market penetration, our ultimate goal is to maximize our ability to sell a product we already have and can capably produce. We don't have to take a lot of risk for this strategy, we just need to find ways to grow. But let's say we want to introduce an existing product to a new market. This approach is exciting and it's potentially lucrative, but it's also riskier than serving an existing market because we have a greater likelihood of being rejected by consumers. It requires a different strategy called market development. And often this is going to start with lots and lots of research. Once we feel like we've got a grasp on what this new market wants, we're going to use some different tactics like adapting our product to the new market, adjusting our packaging and sizing, finding new distribution channels and retail partners, or maybe even looking for different ways to sell our products. So for example, very few Americans use WhatsApp to communicate with each other, but in the developing world, it's one of the most commonly used tools for online shopping and business to consumer communication. So there's a lot of opportunity there for a market expansion. Market development is generally thought of in terms of reaching a new geographic market, but increasingly, marketers are thinking more about appealing to markets identified by psychographic and lifestyle trends rather than dull old demographics alone. This can allow market development to fit within a broader market penetration strategy by carving out niche groups with specific needs and trying to build them into a sizable customer base. Another riskier approach is introducing a new product to an existing market, which is a strategy we call product development. Once again, we're ideally going to start off with a lot of research because we're going to need to understand customer needs and preferences as well as how we can solve them through the innovative new products we want to offer. It can take years to fully develop a new product for a market, and the odds aren't great that our product will be a success. One of the tactics that will help us, though, is spending time crafting a strong value proposition that we can communicate to customers when we want to introduce the product to the market. We should also spend a lot of time in discussions with our channel partners to ensure that once we do launch our product, they'll be helpful in making sure it's a success. We'll definitely have to develop a strong promotional strategy and experiment with our pricing, packaging, and sizing through test markets or iteration with our early customers. And we'll probably have to start with a specific target market in mind within our broader existing market, and then broaden the appeal later on through a market penetration strategy once our product is successfully launched. But there's a riskier approach than all of these, and it's when we introduce a new product to a new market. This is called diversification, and there are actually two flavors of it. One of them is known as related diversification, and it helps us reduce risk somewhat by tying our product to an existing brand or business. Let's say that we're in the business of selling athletic footwear and we want to launch an athletic apparel brand to go along with that. We may improve our chances of success if we tie the new products to our existing brand. That's one reason why businesses tend to focus new market and new product expansion on adjacent industries. They already have an understanding of how to create similar products and serve similar customers, and there's less work involved in getting new customers to understand what this new product brand is all about. But the other approach is unrelated diversification, which means trying to approach a new market with a new product without any existing presence there. So one simple example might be a restaurant owner deciding to build a car wash on the vacant lot next door to his restaurant. You might wonder why someone would even do that, and I'll be honest, it's not really a great idea a lot of the time because it often means having to run two separate businesses with no efficiencies in place. The main reason anyone would even consider it is because they might want to diversify their risk by having a foothold in two different industries. For marketers, a diversification strategy generally means you're going to have several different teams with perhaps a high-level management team or executive overseeing everything. When you look at a big conglomerate like Disney, for example, they have entertainment businesses and theme parks and cruise lines and apparel brands and retail stores and licensing departments and internet platforms and smartphone apps and resort hotels and an international real estate empire among many, many, many other things. And there's just no way one marketing team could serve all those different businesses and needs. Diversification of business means a lot of redundant operations, but it also means you're better equipped to deal with a crisis when, say, public opinion sours on one component of your business, but you're still viewed positively in other markets. So now that we've got a handle on the Ansoff Matrix, let's talk about one more thing, and that's whether or not this is actually useful to marketers today. Because after all, this framework's been around for almost 70 years, and a lot has changed in that time. Shouldn't we be updating this matrix by now to think about things like B2C sales over the internet and international markets and the rise of influencer marketing? And the answer is sort of. The Ansoff Matrix is one of those tools that's general enough to be useful in our modern context because it's broad enough to be applicable to most business situations without being so proscriptive that it's out of touch with reality. But it was also conceived in a much simpler era when product companies would just create things and shove them out in the market and see what would stick. And it's not so easy to do that today for a variety of reasons. So we tend to think about this matrix much more in terms of guiding our general brand strategy, not necessarily the specifics for every individual product. Even so, it's a really handy tool to have in your tool chest if you ever need to go into a boardroom and explain to a group of executives what sorts of tactics they might need to consider to suit their business strategy. And it's just one of the many tools you ought to know if you're going to be an effective marketer today. Well, I'm Sean in St. Louis. Thanks for listening to the Marketing Gateway. See you next time. So today's plug is for your local food bank, which is probably doing more good in your community than you'll ever know. I saw someone say on an online forum once, don't feel bad about using your local food bank every now and then. Most of us are one missed paycheck away from a catastrophe anyway. And that definitely stuck with me because I know it's true. But before you go raid your pantry and reach for those old cans of peas and corn and carrots that you bought years ago and just realized you can donate to a food pantry, let me ask you a simple question. If you aren't eating peas and corn and carrots regularly yourself, why would you assume that your food bank has any need for them? You know, I participate in the Scouting for Food drive every year, and I've been told by food bank workers that they try to use everything they receive, but they still have to throw away a lot of donated food because they're not legally allowed to distribute expired food, and they get a lot of it. The main users of food banks are families with children, and those families often need things like the rest of us need. What's more, in a lot of those families, the adults are both working and it's hard to find time to cook complete meals. So when you donate to your food bank, make sure you're giving them things that those families actually need, like breakfast cereals and healthy snacks and peanut butter and things like that. Or even better, just donate money because food banks are really good at making that money go far by working out special deals with local retailers and distributors. And about those peas and corn and carrots, let me give you a tip. Grab a bottle of V8 juice, combine it with those vegetables in a pot, let it simmer for a couple of hours, and make yourself a good, quick vegetable soup. And if you add some salt and some pepper and some garlic and maybe some sauteed mushrooms, you're going to make it even better. It's a good, cheap, healthy way to use up that food yourself, and then you can donate your savings to your local food bank. By the way, speaking of food banks, you can find yours at feedingamerica.org.